Today's episode of What's on Your Bookshelf is brought to you by Insignia Training Partners, the leaders in outsourced L&D talent and resources. Insignia is a full-service learning and development company that provides L&D talent to design, develop, and deploy your training solutions. Insignia specializes in providing the right resources for your projects at a fraction of the cost as opposed to bringing on new full-time employees. This includes fractional Chief Learning Officer services for enterprise training strategy, instructional designers to develop your training content and materials, facilitators to deliver in-person or virtual training to your staff, LMS administrators to manage the process, virtual training producers to make sure your virtual training is engaging and effective, and coaches to support the learning after training is completed. If you don't have a training department, that's okay. Insignia can be your bolt-on training department. With Insignia, you get dedicated resources providing fractional services by specialists in their field. Whether it's onboarding new hires, upskilling your team, or ensuring compliance, Insignia designs impactful programs that stick. Visit insigniatraining.com to discover their full range of services and to schedule a free consultation. Insignia is your partner for training success.
Welcome to What's on Your Bookshelf with your hosts, Denise Russo and Samantha Powell.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to another episode of What's on Your Bookshelf. This is a life and leadership podcast where we're living out loud the pages of the books that we've taken off of our shelves and put into our lives. My name's Denise Russo. I'm here today with my co-host and friend, Sam Powell, and we are in the midst of exploring a book called Solve for Happy by Mo Gawdat. He's the former Chief Operating Officer at Google. This book is really about his quest for finding, seeking, and owning his happiness in his life. And we are right now today going to wrap up a conversation we had last week, but it's all about reducing distractions, owning our time, and what we need to do to change. Sam, it's so great to always be here with you. How are you doing today?
I'm doing good. Yeah, this chapter 10, which was the first of the ultimate truths, was about now. There's so much good stuff in it, and we talked about most of it last week, but there were a couple of things we wanted to kind of cover before we move into the next ultimate truth, which we'll shift gears here in this episode in a little bit. But yeah, this is reducing distractions. So again, talking about the here and the now and being present and aware. And distractions are the things that get in our way all of the time here.
You and I are super busy people. I will say with confidence that we're both, especially now with us having our own businesses, plus having kids, spouses, travel, all the different things, we're busy. And so there's a lot of things in life that can be distracting. And so this part of the chapter, as we round it up, is about what can you do to reduce the distractions in your life. And what got me here was I highlighted a part where it said less is more, because last week I talked about the life-changing magic of tidying up. Clearly there's a theme here for me. I should get a clue, right? Because then I put in the margins another book, which is called The Joy of Less. So I am thinking, Sam, I don't know, a series on less is more and cleaning up and decluttering is definitely on the horizon for me. So how about for you as we were finishing up this part of the chapter?
Yeah, I highlighted the same thing that, less is more. And when I think about when am I happiest, it's like when things get simplified, right? I'm pregnant, expecting a baby in the fall here. And I had been feeling so bad at this pregnancy that I was in total survival mode. And so I finally yesterday, for probably the first time in a few months, really sat at my desk. My husband actually commented on it. He walked downstairs. He goes, "Oh my gosh, it feels like a real day. You're sitting in your office. You have a candle lit. You've been here. Every time I walk by, you're still in there doing stuff." And it was it was a significant moment. But I spent yesterday clearing all the clutter off my desk. I just been throwing things on. Here's something I need to do. Here's something I need to do. And coming in today and sitting down with this simplified, less things on my desk, less, right? I simplified my to-do list down to one tiny little post-it note of let's just get going and get started. And all those distractions, really, I was much happier, right? There's a little bit more joy just sitting down when there's less. And, you and I talk about that Marie Kondo book all the time. And we have to do it at some point just because we've talked about it so much.
Yes.
But, right. Again, this is about being aware of the now. And so if you can remove some distractions, if less is more, and if you can stop, which is like his first step here, stop and then find something or do something or have something that helps you focus in on right now, right? That's a simple way to do it that can help you kind of bring some of that joy and happiness into right in this moment.
Yeah, absolutely. I actually loved this part of the chapter because it's something that I do with Vincent, my son. So sometimes when Vincent gets upset, he's in college. And so he'll call me sometimes at night and just tell me about something that was really hard that day. And then it starts spinning into something else that was bad about the day. And then something else that was bad about the day until it becomes, these teachers are idiots. I hate this place and I don't want to be here and I don't want to do there. And then 5 seconds later, he loves the place. He loves his classes. He's excited to be where he is. Right. And so usually when he gets on this tangent of anything that is not happy, and let's call it negative, I always tell him, okay, stop. Just stop. Let's take a couple of deep breaths. And now I want you to say 3 positive things. Now, I've done this with him since he was probably 4 years old. So he knows the exercise by now. And so recently we had to do this. And I said, Vincent, and he's like, I know 3 positive things. Okay, I love my stupid school. And I'm happy that I'm in this tiny dorm that is too small for me to relax. And I love you, Mom. And so I was like, no, you failed. He's like, I know, I failed, just like I'm failing my classes, which, by the way, he's not failing his classes. He's getting
Sure.
B's, but to him it's failing. So sometimes we just have to stop, reduce the distractions, and take pause to the things that are around us that are super positive. By the end of that conversation, just to spin it the right way, it ended up being where we were laughing and he ended up being fine.
Absolutely.
But you sometimes just have to get it out, right?
Yeah, exactly. And Mo in the book calls these awareness breaks, right? And he suggests using like a totem, something physical that helps remind you, like he carries something in his pocket that when he feels it, right, he reaches into his right pocket, it's there. And then he has like an exercise of being grateful for, right, and doing some savoring of life joys. Like if we're going back to our last book, right, taking time for gratitude, taking time to savor, and he's got a physical reminder. And so that's kind of what he encourages you, right? Like you stop, then you have something. And like you're doing that for Vincent, right? You're sort of that totem for him. He calls you up and then you're like, pause, give me the 3 things, right? Like, let's talk about it. Right. And, so you've kind of become his totem in that space, but sometimes people carry something physical and it's like, okay, as soon as I feel this rock in my pocket, I'm going to think of something that is positive right now. I'm going to look out and be aware of something in my space. So sometimes giving yourselves those physical or virtual reminders. Maybe it's something on your desktop. Maybe it's some reminder that pops up every once in a while, but something that drives you to what he calls this awareness break to bring you into the here and now, to give you that space to savor, be grateful, all those sort of good things.
A couple weeks ago, I was out to dinner with Olivia, my daughter, and you can't see it since we're not on video, but you could see it, Sam. So you see this bracelet. So we saw this bracelet in the window of a shop, and the bracelet has a little dolphin on it. I love dolphins. I'm mesmerized by water and I just absolutely love dolphins. And so as soon as she saw it, she said, oh my gosh, Mommy, you have to get that bracelet. Let's go into the store. And I'm thinking, well, we're going to be late for dinner. And she's like, no, it's going to be fine. We'll be fine. Let's just go get the bracelet. So see, she lives in awareness all the time. She saw something that I was just going to walk past and not even notice, but she noticed. Not only did she notice it, but she noticed it like for me. And anyways, this little shop was like this type of place that has cool things like candles and jewelry and different stuff. And so she said to me, Mommy, now that when you put this bracelet on, you're going to see the dolphin. And I was at the time, I was kind of experiencing something a little bit stressful. And she said, so now hopefully when you see the dolphin, it's going to make you less stressful. And then she said to me, She has a similar bracelet, doesn't have a dolphin on it, but it has these little beads on it. And she said, sometimes when I'm sitting and I'm feeling stressed out about a class, or I'm stressed out about a situation at school, because she's also in college, she said, I either crochet, which I know you're a fan of crochet,
Yeah.
or she's got a bracelet. And what she does is she'll hold on to the beads, and each bead she'll try to think of something positive. I mean, she lives this stuff out loud so well. I learned so much from my kids. And so I've actually been doing that with this new bracelet, especially when I'm stressed out. I'm probably going to break the bracelet because it's been quite a few weeks for me. But it's a reminder every time I look down at it that you can have this sort of a thing, whether it's a rock in your pocket, or whether it's a bracelet, or whether it's your mom.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. And we all need those reminders to kind of help us stop and live in the now. And he also talks about timeless time, spending time that you aren't paying attention to a watch or a clock. It reminded me of your beach story you told us a few episodes ago of, going and just spending time on the beach. And it felt like time got away from you, during that. I think I was just re-listening to the episode where you talked about that. So that's why it's fresh in my mind. But, having time where you just let time go and you just sit there and experience, right? You sit on the beach, you go sit in your backyard, you sit on your back porch, I don't know, just do something that is like that. And then he wraps this chapter up by talking about whatever you do it well.
Yes. Whatever you do it well, I think was so poignant, because he says we need an alternate between being and doing to be a productive member of society. So if you're going to do things, the question is, do you always perform at your best? Probably not. I mean, the reality is we don't always do our very best. Like my dad used to tell me when I was younger, as long as you can lay your head down at night and say, you know what, today I did my best, then you can sleep well. Well, how many days did I lay my head down and I thought to myself, no, I really didn't do my best today. I didn't do my best. But the trick is trying to do everything to the best of your ability in those moments, whatever best might mean. You can always up your best. Like, isn't even that a principle of John Maxwell? Is that everything worthwhile is uphill, he says. And so we know that it's a climb, and that maybe you never get to the top, you never get to the summit. But the point is, you don't slide down, you keep climbing up.
Right. And I think it's like that beautiful blend of doing and being, right? And that's where he talks about, be aware of the journey. And he talks about whatever you do, give it your undivided attention. So while you're not just being, he's encouraging you to take time to just be. But the reality is life is a blend of both doing and being. And so when you are doing, be in it, right? Really give it that undivided attention. And he says, live your life in the here and the now, not inside your head, right? Don't be thinking about the next thing, be experiencing what you're doing now. Really give yourself over to those moments and, the things that you're doing in your life, which, like, I love that thought process of just fully investing, right? Like, I'm here with you doing this podcast. I'm not going to think about anything else. Phone's turned off, distractions are gone, right? Like, it's just everything that's set up right here and right now is about being in this moment with you and what we're doing, and, really spending the time in that. And that's such a more connected way, right? That was what he talked about. The top level of awareness here is connection.
Do you think, Sam, like it's easier to do everything we're saying when life is like on this flat, stable ground? But what happens when we experience change? And so that's the next chapter, right? So we're moving into chapter 11 now.
Exactly. Yeah. And I thought this was really interesting, right? So this is the second of the ultimate truths, and this is change, right? And the first thing I thought of was the only constant in life is change, right? That quote, which is so very true, right? You have to accept that change is always happening, and that is that is constant in your life here. But the title of this chapter is The Pendulum Swing. And I did one of the science experiments I did as a kid was about pendulums and like how they work, right? So just think about like a string hanging from a stick, and it's got like a metal heavy ball on it. And the pendulum is always trying to sit at equilibrium. It's trying to sit straight down, right? Where there's no movement. That is the state it's constantly trying to get to. But if you exert force, like you pull it up from the side, it's going to move back and forth, back and forth, back and forth until it gets to this state, right? You present change in the situation. You put change on the metal ball. And so, yes, things are moving and adjusting and stuff is happening, but it's always trying to get back to its state. Its whole goal here is to get back to its state of equilibrium, of rest, kind of in the middle. And so what he really is getting to is that there's a million choices you make in a day, a million things that happen, a million pieces of change that come at us. And if we sit here and we try to control all of those things that are happening, we're going to end up very far away from joy. But if we think about this chapter and we think about what this is, it's really about getting down to this, just letting the pendulum swing, letting it go back and forth, letting life happen, letting the change exist to get back to this equilibrium, which I thought was such an interesting journey to take us on when we're talking about change. Like it's an approach to change. I think I've lived it without consciously thinking about it, but I've never consciously thought about this in this way.
Yeah, this one was tricky for me too, because, for example, he shifts into talking about the things that change in our life and the expectations we have around those things in our life. And then he talks about the multiverse. And so for people,
I was like, this is like the fourth time in this book where I'm like, man, this is just meta. Like we're out there in these concepts. But yeah. And all I could think about was the Spider-Verse movie that came out. My son and I watched it. And that movie ends on a total cliffhanger waiting for a part 2. And I hate cliffhangers. Like I want the end of the story right now. So all I could think about was the Spider-Man multiverse situation. And the fact that like it's this scientific concept that there are a million versions of you out in the world, right? Every choice you've made or every choice that's been made that affects you, that version exists in the world, right? Like, what if I hadn't married my husband? What if I hadn't turned left, instead of right? And those versions all exist out. This is a scientific theory that's out there that people spend time, really, researching and investigating. And that's how he starts this chapter. But his point is, right, there's this whole multiverse universe space out there where every option exists, everything that could be happening. And then he talks about a cockpit, right? If you were trying to control all these things that could happen, all these choices that could lead into all these different paths of life, you would have this crazy complex cockpit of buttons that you're trying to control how everything works, and that would be exhausting. And that's the opposite of joy, right? When you're just trying to control everything that's happening, there's no space for happiness. There really is no space to get to peace in that. And that's when he goes into this thought process of just let it flow, right? Let the pendulum swing and let things come back to their equilibrium, which he calls the path.
When he's talking about the path, he talks about this through the lens of finding the path to least resistance, the simplest path. So if you're thinking about this multiverse and you're stuck in this concept of, well, what if I would have not taken that job? What if I would have married a different person? What if I would have done this? What if I would have done that? Well, you didn't, because in this verse that you're living in, this universe, this one verse that you live in, your life is this way. Now, what he does say, though, which is interesting, is that he says, your control is not gained at these micro levels or that gigantic cockpit that you might see inside of a rocket ship. He said, it's rather in how you need to do the little things in life and in this simplistic way of finding the path. And so one of the things that I had highlighted here was he said, every single thing we do has a point of balance, and that no effort is needed to keep any system at its equilibrium. When everything you do feels effortless, you found your path. So when I was listening to you share the story about the pendulum swinging, when I was a little girl, my gosh, I had to probably not even be 2 digits years old. I remember my grandfather had one of these things on his desk that had 5 little balls on it. And what you would do is swing the one ball and then it would hit. And then now all the balls are hitting, but they're like in unison and this click, 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 and then the thing didn't stop, but it's because it was getting momentum, right? So if everything you do has this natural balance and you have momentum and you're focused on the positive things, you're embracing the time that you have, and you are taking actions on things that make you happy, this is where he then shifts into talking about the balance of yin and yang. Well, yin and yang, you could say, is there's a balance of good and evil. There's a balance of black and white. There's a balance of good and bad. There's a balance of happy and unhappy. There's a balance of life and death. But are those absolutes? Or is there somewhere, like he said earlier in the chapter, about this long line of dots? And somewhere along that line is where your truth is.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And I just like this thought process of, I don't know, letting go of trying to control all the things in your life and like trying to, right? And this is about change, right? There's so much change. There's always something happening that throws things out of this little box that you're trying to get them into, right? It's like, I want my life to be stable, like I value stability. I hear that all the time from people. And it's like, that's great, but you never get to stability because change is a truth of life, right? Like change is constantly happening. But if you think about this concept that he's like telling you to embrace, is it's just embracing the balance, right?
Mm-hmm.
Taking it all in, letting it unfold in a way that is effortless, right? Just, I always call this like riding the waves of life. Like if life is pushing you in a certain direction, like just ride it out, right? Like just kind of trust that things will come to equilibrium given enough time. This period of time may feel chaotic, but like if you just zoom out a bit and let the pendulum swing and let the things happen and experience the yin and the yang, the good and the bad, the highs and the lows and all that sort of stuff, eventually life will bring itself back to equilibrium. And if you stay on that effortless path, right, you sit in joy, you sit in happiness. And I just think that's super interesting. And if I look back on my life, I can find that to be very true. I can find that to be like, there's been lots of moments of chaos. There's been lots of moments where it's like, I don't know how I'm going to get to this. But if enough time goes by in retrospect, right, you're just following what's happening and it'll work out in one way or the other. And if you ride that with kind of this acceptance that change is happening, I think then you're in a position to experience that happiness, experience that joy.
I think what happens is when we're not happy, we sit in that state of the doing. We go against the wave. We get pulled by the undercurrent. We try to stay afloat when we're sinking instead of, like you said, get on top of the wave and let it bring you into the shore, to use your analogy. And it makes me think about a time when I was really burning out, and I knew I was burning out at work, and I was afraid, I would say, maybe, of all the work it was going to take to get unburnt. So it was almost easier to stay burning. Like I was telling that story about the person I coached a few years ago. But when I came to the shore, I realized at that point, Sam, that I no longer wanted to work as hard as I was working, or to be as burnt out as I was being burnt out.
Yeah.
I want to live a comfortable life well. And so when I was reading this chapter, I started to realize for myself things that I already know, which is just be content with the path that God already has planned for me. I'm a person of faith, and so I believe that that path is already planned out. Now, maybe you listening to our podcast have a different belief or a different faith, but what we're trying to share in this book is that if you just live on the path that you're on, embrace your moments, be fully aware with attention of what's happening in, around, and through and outside of you. And for you to focus more on the positive than the negative, whether it's journaling, whether it's documenting, whether it's having this totem idea, your life will be so much more enjoyable and rewarding. And to your point, you said peaceful. And he said this in the very, very beginning of the book when he was kind of defining happiness. And what I highlighted in that part was that happiness for me is joy, peace, peacefulness, and contentment. Happiness for you might be something else. Everybody seeks after different things. But if you go back and listen to the episodes of The How of Happiness by Sonia Lyubomirsky, we're getting good at her name, by the way, I think. But She talked about the things that don't make you happy: money, fame,
Right.
fortune, the things that people chase after that aren't the things that bring you the happiness. And so he ends this kind of by talking about the next piece, which is looking down. So you have success, you have progress, you've got ambition, and you keep wanting to go up. Like we talked about John Maxwell saying, if there's anything worthwhile, you have to go up, uphill. But he also talks about here is, when do you decide that you've had enough of the going up? Like, when is that chase done?
Yeah. And I think what he really kind of gets to in this point is like where you're drawing your attention, because he calls this looking down. So he says, we obsessively compare, especially in Western culture, right? Where we're like, let's achieve, let's do, let's get it done, let's, keep progressing. But as we obsessively compare, we set ourselves up for disappointment, because there will always be someone who's gone further or done better. And so we forget, when we're looking up and looking at these people who are farther ahead of us, that there's the flip side of this distribution curve, where each of them has less than we do in at least one other thing. Because that's just how the game of life is defined. You can't have everything, right? If you're going to chase one thing, you're sacrificing something else. Yeah. We are always making those choices. But we tend to think like, oh, and running a business, I find this all the time, right? Like there'll be some Facebook ad or something, right? Because Facebook's stalking you and your Google searches and everything you're doing. That is like, this is how to have this kind of business, or have a 7-figure business, have a 6-figure business, like all this kind of stuff that distracts you. And I see something sometimes and then I get this imposter syndrome of like, oh, I'm not doing that. But what he's encouraging us is like, don't look up at these other people who are doing whatever. Look down, and it's looking down in gratitude for everything you have accomplished. And so when I flip that script, and when I think about what are all the things I have done in just 1 year, not even quite 1 year of having a business, that list gets really long, and I'm really proud of it. And I'm really content with it in a lot of ways. Yeah. When I refocus, the thing. And when I talk to people about imposter syndrome, I think all the time. I just think it's because of the stage of life I'm in, and how like in the thick of everything, of raising kids, of being in the careers, and like all that kind of stuff, that so many of my friends and family, like we just deal with imposter syndrome a lot. And that's what this is it's don't get tricked by looking up. It's focus downward, right? He says, here's the challenge. Try reframing ambition so the focus is on the goal of becoming a better person, regardless of how you compare to others. Even better, look down. Work hard and grow, make a difference in the world, but please feel good about yourself. Please stop looking at what you don't have. What you don't have is infinite. And I just love that thought process, right? What I don't have is infinite. And so stop focusing on it, right? Stop thinking, stop the comparison. And I just love the please feel good about yourself, right? Yes. When you're thinking about this. And it reminded me of the last book, right? It's focusing on gratitude, right? Focusing on, really being grateful for what you've got. And that's kind of what he gets into.
There was a movie I watched at Christmas time last year, and I can't remember the name of it, but it was with Eddie Murphy, and it was, I think, on Netflix. But I do remember there was this scene that kept showing in the movie, which was like you ever seen like a mural or a billboard on the side of like a brick building that's like a billboard, but it's painted, and it said, comparison is the thief of joy.
Yeah.
And that was kind of the theme of the movie in any case. And I recall seeing that and being struck by it, that it's very easy to get caught up in keeping up with the Joneses and wishing you had what somebody else had. And yet, to your point here, is that happiness, according to Mo, is what you said: work hard, grow, and make a difference in the world. And he sort of ends this by saying, if you could change your perspective, or what we call mind shifting, if you can shift your mind, you'll see so many reasons to be happy with the blessings that you have. So maybe you don't have what the guy next door has, but do you really need it? And are you willing to do what, like John Maxwell said this one time, because he was talking about how everybody says, I want to be like you. And he said one time, I can't remember, this was years ago now, but he said, until you're willing to do what I did to have what I have, then you don't know what it took to be where I am.
Right.
So you just think you
Exactly.
know by looking at the surface of a person.
Exactly, right? You're not seeing the sacrifice. You're not seeing what they don't have as a result of what they do have, right? And what they've worked for.
Yeah.
And, instead of looking up, right, looking at these people who are doing these things and saying, oh,
Yeah.
I don't measure up to that, right? That's it. There's an infinite things that you don't have and you don't measure up to. What he's really encouraging you is to look down into what you have, look down into what you've accomplished, look down in gratitude for the things that you've got. And that is the path to happiness, right? Focusing there instead of focusing up and out
Yeah.
is what really leads you to joy. And again, like this is in the context of this truth that we're in. I know we're towards the end here, but this is about change. Life is constantly changing. Things are constantly adjusting. And so he's telling you, like, while the truth is life is changing, there is something always constantly new. Tomorrow is going to be different. 5 minutes from now is going to be different than right now is in some small way. And so focusing down and focusing in on what you've got, what you have, what those blessings are, what those good things are, is kind of how to live in this world of change, like how to be happy in the midst of the fact that things are changing.
Absolutely. I guess I'll end by saying what I took away from this chapter is imagine if you had a coin in your hand, there's a head and there's a tail, there's a top and there's a bottom. And the way he described it is that for him to pursue this solution to happiness was that instead of him looking at one side of the coin, which was feeling resentful that his son died, he had to turn it over and look at the other side of the coin, was to be grateful that he lived. And it was through that boy's life that this father was able to find truly the secrets to happiness in his own life.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. And I love that, right? It's two sides, like you're saying, it's two sides of the same coin, and you can choose the resentful side or you can choose the grateful side. And so what we're saying is when you choose the grateful side, you can solve for happy.
Absolutely. Well, gosh, we went through so much today. I've learned so much. I've enjoyed, of course, all of your stories. So, friends, if you've been listening and you're getting value from this and you're not yet subscribing, we'd love for you to do that. If you're getting value from this and you haven't yet shared our podcast with others, we sure would appreciate it if you would share our show with your friends and your colleagues. And we'd also really love to just hear from you. So if you'd like to share what you're going through, learning, maybe you're having some aha moments, Scott puts in the show notes ways for you to reach out to us, and we'd love to hear from you. But for now, my name's Denise Russo, and on behalf of my friend Sam Powell, this has been another episode of What's on Your Bookshelf.